Yeah, it was very subdued. It was tempered. I wasn't sharing all the bullshit and the baggage. I was just sharing like maybe what I thought he wanted to hear and what was like the culturally acceptable answer. Yeah. But when I started working with my new therapist, I made the decision that no, I'm just going to share. And I might sound like an evil son of a bitch, but if I want to improve, then I have to be honest with somebody who can actually help me navigate my feelings. Kip, what's up, brother? So great to see you. A little different than we normally do because we're not normally recording on a Friday, but we've got some upcoming plans, so we got to make some adjustments.
Yep. Just like life, we have to pivot and adjust as necessary.
That's right. For those of you who may not know, Kip and I are going on a hunt. Not next week, the following week.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, the following week. So it's coming up fast. We're going to go hunt some axis deer in Hawaii. Is this your first archery
First
hunt?
archery. Literally every day I go home, right. I spend 30 minutes, I shoot some arrows, and I'm just hoping if I do that daily between now and then, I will know somewhat what to do to at least throw an arrow at something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll have shots for sure. Whether you hit something or not is to be determined. Same with me. I'm not saying you will or won't, and I will, but it's a tough hunt, and not very many people get to say their first archery hunt is on the island of Molokai shooting axis deer. So it's going to be a good time.
I'm excited. I mean, of course I'm excited. Of course I want to go and get a kill and be successful. So I'll try to have the expectation of doing good, but also the humility of realizing that it's about the moment and appreciate it and try not to put too high of expectations on how it shows up. So we'll see.
I think that's a really good way, especially when it comes to hunting. You know, you train for the best, you train for the outcome you desire, and you've said this in the past, once you get there, nothing else matters because you've already put in the work, you've put in the effort, and hopefully it all comes together. The problem with life is there's external circumstances that are beyond your control. There's deer that are trying to stay alive just as much as you're trying to kill them. If you're dealing with people, they have their own set of values and principles and interests that sometimes are aligned and sometimes aren't. So it's tough. You know, I wish everybody and everything would just bend and succumb to my will, but obviously that just doesn't work out like that. It
hasn't worked out yet. I'm assuming archery grouping is a good sign, just like shooting a rifle. And so I actually feel pretty good at 20 and 30 yards. My groupings are solid. The funny part is all my groupings are about 8 inches to the right of the target of where I'm aiming. I'm super consistent off target to the right in the same exact spot. So I don't know if my sight's off or
have you made your adjustments yet?
I haven't touched anything on the bow. Is that what you're talking?
Oh, that's the problem. We'll talk offline. So just like when you're sighting, it's not that you're off. I mean, we can look at your technique. It's not that the technique is bad. It may or may not be. We need to look at it. But when you get a brand new gun, for example, and you put a new optic on there, the grouping is good. It doesn't matter where it's grouped, but then you start walking it into the bullseye. And it's the same thing with archery. If you're shooting everything 8 inches to the right, that's not bad. The fact that it's consistently 8 inches to the right means that we just need to move your pin to the right a little bit. And what that'll do is that'll naturally make you adjust your aim and bring it to the left, which is going to be center. So that's an easy fix. We'll talk offline about it. I'll send you a video and show you how to do that.
Yeah, because it's consistent. I'm wicked consistent.
Perfect.
In the same spot. So
yeah, I'd rather you be consistent in one direction, and all we have to do now is just walk it in, just like with a rifle. You don't change your shot at all. You don't change your aim or anything else. We'll just walk it in based on the adjustments that we make to the sight. Easy fix.
Got it. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm excited, man. Yeah. I did my first, not that this means anything. I realize it's more accident than anything, but I already ruined an arrow because I Robin Hood it, caught the fletching already.
I saw that.
Hey, that's kind of cool. It's pretty consistent. So it's kind of fun.
It's actually not common. I've been hunting for 8 years and I've shot thousands and thousands of arrows. I may have done that maybe 3 or 4 times tops. Okay. So the fact that you're getting grouping that tight where you're ripping the fletchings off of other arrows.
That's a good sign.
You didn't ruin that arrow, by the way, so don't throw it away. You just need to put a new fletching on it.
See, that's the other.
Yeah, don't get, because those arrows get expensive.
Well, and it's funny because I went to the archery store and I'm like, do you need arrows? I'm like, yeah. And then they pull out shafts, right? And I'm like, you don't have pre-made ones? They're like, oh no, we have to build these. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Like, all right, keep adding up.
Yeah. They cut them to size.
Yeah.
I know.
It's cool. It's cool.
Well, good, man. It's going to be good. Well, I'll help you get some of that stuff worked out. I've got some changes here. Obviously, you can see the new studio lighting has changed a little bit. Awesome. I'm very excited about this. The reason I'm excited about it, and there's a lesson I want to share other than just bragging about how good it looks. The lesson is hire people that are experts. I mean, I've done the YouTube thing. I've looked at videos. I know a little bit about lighting. This guy, I hired him. He's a videographer. His name is Drew Renner here in town. I called him up. I'm like, hey, man, I need just some consulting with my lighting in my studio. He's like, cool. So he came over, charged an hourly rate for it, came over, and within 5 minutes, it looked 100% better. And then we spent about an hour tweaking, adjusting. He sent me a link for some other things that I need. So you're going to see some changes. If you're not on YouTube, make sure you go to youtube.com/orderofman and you can see what the lighting looks like. But it's a testament to the power of hiring experts. I spent $120 or something. He spent an hour and a half with me, spent $120, and I'm using less stuff than I was before. I have one less lighting or one fewer lights than I did before. And I literally have, you can't see it, I have a bed sheet over this lighting to soften it up a little bit. It's wild what you can do with some of this stuff. I mean, this is just the power of just making sure if you want to be the best, hire people to help you be the best, whether it's lighting or jiu-jitsu or firearms or archery or business or social media. Hire coaches, implement their advice. It's going to pay dividends.
Yeah, I love that principle. And it looks great. Looks great. All right, headlines. Are we doing headlines?
Let's get into some questions.
I have one prepared.
I don't know. If you have one, it's just you today. I didn't even think about it since we're off. So if you have one, get after it.
I'm assuming you'll appreciate this headline, or you'll have an opinion about it nonetheless. Okay, check this out. Erik Prince used to be a founder of BlackRock. Okay, recently appeared on a podcast, literally this past week, and said the following: "It's time for us to put the imperial hat back on to say we're going to govern those countries if they're incapable of governing themselves. Because enough is enough. We are done being invaded." And this, he's talking about helping Africa because, we're tired of being invaded. So, man, we got to govern Africa better. He says, Prince said, noting how Africa governments are stocked with corruption, politics, looting, and pillaging, which leads to a major disorder and mass migration abroad. He added that he's absolutely talking about being a colonialist. Okay. So this is this guy's statement. I'm stealing this information from someone else that shared this. Here's the funny part. So Erik Prince, no longer with BlackRock. He is now part of a VC called Frontier Resource Group. And according to and I have their LinkedIn page up right now, this is what Frontier Resource Group does. They're a private equity fund investing in natural resource opportunities in the frontier markets. We specialize in risk mitigation, operational efficiencies within complex environments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And learning this, I immediately went to, and it's a scripture in the LDS religion, and I get we're not all part of the scripture or this religion, but this has always spoken to me. And the phrase is, "We have learned by sad experience that it is the nature and dispensation of almost all men. As soon as they get a little authority, as they suppose, they will immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion." And I love that phrase because you see it. People get a little bit of authority, and all of a sudden, we practice unrighteous dominion. We get full of ourselves. We think we know what's best for people, and we practice unrighteous controls. And this is just a prime example of this. You don't think this is, I mean, and we even see this in small companies where we get into positions and we assume that we know what's best for people. We don't go out of our way to ask for insights and their opinions, and we twist the truth a little bit. We justify some action so we can remain inside of control. And I think this is just a prime example of that shadiness that so many men practice. It's crazy.
I mean, the real question is, what do you do to combat it? Because it is the nature of man. Yeah, I think. I pulled up a quote here that I think a lot of people have heard, and it's this, and you've heard this too. Power tends to corrupt. Absolutely, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah, this is the same concept that you're talking about here. The question is, how do we refrain from exercising unrighteous dominion over other people? There's nothing wrong with power, by the way.
That's a good point.
And I think there is a misconception about that because people, especially in modern times, with you use the word colonize to colonialize certain countries or certain geographical areas, you know, and people look at this tyrannical patriarchy. And they look at the hierarchy of organizations, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, and governments. And we look at it and very shallowly and ignorantly believe that it's just a product of power. And it's typically not, especially in this country. It's a product of aptitude. It's the meritocracy that we still live in for the most part. So power is not bad. There is situations in which we have power. If you're the employer or the boss or the business owner, you have more power than the rank and file employee, clearly. So the question is not whether or not power is being utilized. It's whether or not you're utilizing it righteously. And if you have power, what's the phrase? With great with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. Guys, we have a moral obligation to take our authority and power that we have or that we've earned or even been bestowed to us to do righteous things, to serve other people, to lift other people up, to use the resources that we have at our disposal to serve other people, to serve ourselves, to do righteous things, to solve problems, real problems that impact people negatively. The challenge is it's hard because your nature is to amass and maintain that power at all expenses, at any cost. And it's something we have to fight against constantly because the nature of man is to just be corrupt. Totally.
And
I heard a pastor the other day or a bishop it was the Pope. It was the Pope. He said, "I think all men are good." I'm like, that's biblically incorrect. You're the freaking Pope.
That's funny.
Men are fallen. That is biblically inaccurate. And I'm not saying I'm a biblical scholar. I made a comment about Jesus having the disciples to learn from, and I've been called out on that. And so there's some nuance to that, what I meant, but I failed to explain. But that's another conversation. But the Pope is biblically inaccurate. Men are fallen.
Yeah.
We are in a fallen state. We are sinners by our nature.
That's why the natural man
and it's up
is
to us
to God. Yeah.
Exactly. It's up to us to combat against the natural man and be better, be more righteous, work towards doing good things. So it was really funny when I heard the Pope say that. I'm like, wait, what did he just say? That we're naturally good? No, we're not. We're fallen. We're tempted, we're sinners, and we need redemption.
Yeah. Well, and what's great about it is to know it, right? And then what do we do with it? We check ourselves. We make sure, wait, am I doing this out of authority? Is this about me? Is this about my ego, or is this what's best? And that's how we do it. And you asked this question, well, Kip, then what do we do with it, right? Well, what we do with it is we call things out. We see things like this, and we say something about it, at least. And we have the conversation around it to help mitigate and put checks and balances in place.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. I was just pulling something up there. All right, man. Well, let's get into some questions. I think that's very interesting.
Crazy, huh?
I don't really know the context of all that. So what does he live in? Prince lives in Africa somewhere in Africa, an African province, or I don't know the term.
He sold Blackwater, started a VC. That VC specializes in frontier environmental investments. And here he is on a podcast.
But where does
he's from the U.S. And here he is on a podcast talking about how we should colonize Africa because, they don't know what they're doing, right?
Yeah. Well,
look, shade.
I mean, that's evil in and of itself, but then you start mixing in the corruption and the conflict of interest with running an organization that wants to steal and extrapolate resources. Yeah, that's a problem.
Doesn't look good. Yeah, the optics are not good at all.
Yeah, but he'll get away with it. People are just willing to turn the other cheek. Totally. So, anyways, let's get into questions.
So we're going to field questions from the gram, from Instagram. To follow Mr. Mickler there, go to at Ryan Mickler, and that's your handle as well for X. All right. I see a lot of influencers. This is last in line leadership. I see a lot of influencers who profess to be Christians that really aren't as open about it when promoting their business coaching and curriculum, book, and social platforms. I've always appreciated the way you are bold about your faith in most conversations, but I wonder why many Christian men seem to compartmentalize their faith when conducting business or interacting in a secular environment. And this is a good question because I actually kind of do this, I think. So.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of different things I would suggest here. Number one is not all people are going to behave the same way that you do or you would like them to. So you're saying, well, they're not doing what I would do, right? Because they're a completely different person. So for us to judge that person and say, well, he should be doing this, he should be doing that, he doesn't believe, he's a believer, he's a 50% believer. Well, he's just going about his life differently than you. And who's to say that he doesn't talk about those things in other contexts? If I'm a lawyer, for example, I'm probably not going to profess my Christian faith to my clients because it's really irrelevant to the conversation that we're having. Now, will I hopefully exercise Christian principles in the way that I approach my work with a client? I would hope. That's the goal, but it's not really always necessary or even appropriate to bring those things up. So, and there's also another risk that you run, and I've seen this plenty of times where people profess their Christianity, but they're using it as a gimmick and a tactic to acquire new business. So are you saying that person's more righteous because they're talking more about Christianity when they're just leveraging it as a tool to manipulate people? Of course, that's not the right thing. So it's hard to judge people's motives, and that's what we need to be very, very cautious of. Well, that person doesn't believe in God because he doesn't talk about it to my liking. How do you know? How do you know what that person's experiencing and going through? Now, so that's one. The other thought I have about this, and I appreciate that you think that we talk about this. I don't really feel like I talk about it a whole lot, actually, relative to as much as I could. But I do that by design. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who hear what I'm about to say and rebuke and maybe even chastise what I'm going to say because of what the Bible shares about not being ashamed. I think it's in Romans, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. So you could interpret what I'm about to say as being ashamed. It's not. But this is a secular organization, and I really believe that we can reach more people with Christian principles if we don't talk about it under the guise or the lens of Christianity all the time.
Because they can't relate as much.
And if that's not agreeable to you, they can't. No. They're like, wait, you're talking about this concept of masculinity, biblical masculinity, but I don't believe in the Bible. So you just lost that person. There are other organizations out there who do talk a lot more about Christianity than we do. And those are great organizations, and I believe in what they're doing, and I think they should do it that way. But we do this by design, and no one can doubt, and this might sound even a little arrogant, but no one can doubt the reach, the millions and millions of men who are not Christian that we have reached with biblical Christian principles because we haven't talked about it from that context. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But for me, this is how I choose to run the organization. And you will hear me talk about my faith, but I don't ever push that faith on other people And I try to make arguments that aren't based in faith alone. And I'll tell you why. There's a logical fallacy called the appeal to authority. So if I say, for example, in the concept of masculinity, and I'm talking to us as fellow listeners and people of Order, Man, and Iron Council, that the reason you should be a good man is because the Bible tells us to be good men. Well, what about the guy who doesn't believe in the Bible? So all you did right there is you undermined your own argument because your argument is only strong enough in so much that somebody believes in the authority that you're appealing to, the Bible in this case. But if somebody doesn't believe in the Bible, it's very easy to dismiss that argument and say, well, I don't believe in the Bible, so am I okay being an evil man?
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to make an argument, you should be able to do it from a faith-based perspective. But I also believe that you should have a way to explain your side of the argument to anyone who may not believe in the authority that you're claiming right now. It's just a great way to approach life because you're going to talk with all sorts of people. You know, it's like somebody saying, well, you know, you're raising your sons wrong. And I'm a therapist. And because I'm a therapist, I know. And then you say, well, how many kids do you have? They're like, I don't have kids. Okay, your authority means nothing to me. That little designation, degree, piece of paper, although I commend you for doing the work to get it, means nothing. You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like to raise sons and daughters. You don't know what it's like to have to put your kid to sleep when they're crying or pick them up because they've had a bad day or celebrate with them when they do something incredible. You've read about it. You've seen it, maybe some nieces and nephews, but you haven't done it. So your authority means nothing to me. Anyways, maybe I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's why we approach it that way.
That's why principles are so profound, because they're transcendent. And so when we get past the authority of something and we decide to get into principles, then they're relatable across multiple spectrums. That's why when we look at leadership development, how often can you reference being a parent and use parent examples to teach leadership? Because it's a principle, and that principle is transcendent, whether you're a parent, whether you're a boss, whether you're a passion, it doesn't matter. Principles are principles. And so the more that we can connect to the principle, the more relatable it is. And then people can be wherever they are on the path of growth and development, they can find that relationship and understanding of the principle where they are. So I'm the same way. In fact, I'm probably more cautious around religious things, mostly because the other part is I don't want people to feel like I'm using it as a tool. You know, so I'm probably overly cautious around it because I don't want people to think that I'm using it as a tool to manipulate or whatever. And I have to be even careful with that pendulum swinging too far in that direction.
I don't worry too much about that because I know my motives. Yeah. And so I'm not going to worry about other people interpreting my motives. I think that's also a dangerous game. Well, what if they think this?
That's what I mean. Really care. Like I have to be careful not to do that too much. Otherwise, I'm playing a game trying to control and manipulate people, right?
Well, no, I'm saying I'm not as aware of people's perception of my motives because it doesn't matter what they think my motives are.
For you,
I try not to judge people's motives. You know, if you do something, Kip, that I don't approve of, like it isn't right for me. I can say, hey, I don't approve of that, or I don't like that, or I don't appreciate that. But I can't really make assumptions about your motives because I just don't know.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is I don't appreciate it based on my own perspective. But your motives, I don't know what they are. Unless you share with me or, you know, I'm privy to some information. But yeah, I mean, this is the scripture I was quoting. It's Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. That is, I'm not sure which translation that is. But anyways.
Cool.
Yeah, it's like we don't have to be ashamed, but also we have to be intelligent about the way that we're approaching what we're doing here.
All right, Max Nairn, how do you enhance your skills mentally and physically? How do you network more? kind of two different questions there, but things, I guess, maybe he's asking particular, what are you doing to enhance your skills mentally and physically? Because we could spend a whole hour talking about different ideas, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty broad question, so I can give you a broad answer. Figure out what you want to do and hire coaches. We talked a little bit about that. Invest in training, practice, and that's it. I mean, there really isn't. It's a pretty broad and general question, but the answer is very simple. It's figure out exactly what you're trying to do or be or improve upon. That's important because if you don't know your target, you're going to miss it. And even if you hit it, you don't know why. So you need to know what you're aiming at. And then you need to bring the right people in, the right resources and people in to improve that skill set. And then the only other thing I would say is there's got to be some way to measure it. You know, if I want to become a better public speaker, for example, that's a skill that all of us could develop to varying degrees. I could know that I want to do that. I could hire speaking coaches. I could go to courses and conferences that teach about public speaking. I could practice it. I could put myself in positions where that opportunity exists. But then I also have to be able to measure it and say, okay, did I improve? That's where our after action review process comes in. Did I improve? Did I get better? Was I able to connect better? Did people appreciate the way I presented or the anecdotes that I shared more than they have in the past? Did I feel better about it? You have to have that review process, but that's a pretty simple thing.
Yeah. I love your last statement because I don't think that's what we do, right? It's like, oh, I want to improve mentally, so I'm going to read some books, I'm going to listen to podcasts, and then we're just doing it. And we're like, actually, am I getting better? am I learning? Am I growing? Right? Is there intent around what I'm doing? If it's not, we might be just wasting a lot of time. It might just be busy work, right? So I think just like if you want to improve, you need to measure it. Just even on the physical side, are you actually getting stronger? How's your fitness? How's your strength and those other things?
There's a concept called the OODA loop, which is an acronym, OODA, OODA loop. Have you heard of this, Kip?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the OODA loop is a process that I'm describing, identified by, I believe it's Colonel John Boyd. Don't quote me on that. I think that's who it is. Air Force pilot created this loop or identified this loop, and it's OODA. It stands for, the first O is observe. The second is orient. The third is decide. The fourth is act. So to observe your surroundings, observe what you're good at, what you're not good at. Next is to orient yourself. Okay, well, I'm not a great public speaker, so I could definitely improve in that department. I'm not a great marketer, so I can improve in that department. Or I'm not as fit as I'd like to be, so I need to get more fit. And then deciding is to make the decision with a course of action. I'm going to hire this person. I'm going to bring in this resource. I'm going to do these things. And then lastly is you need to take action, but it's called a loop. So it doesn't just stop. It's not linear. So when you act, then you go back to observe. Okay, so you acted, now you observe. Did what I set out to do get accomplished? Did I improve? Did I get better? So the OODA loop has been a good heuristic for me to develop skills that I want to and need to develop in my life. As far as networking goes, I think it's the same thing. A lot of people just think, oh, just randomly, willy-nilly, just meet people. I'm too busy just to meet people. I want to meet specific people. So I know what I'm trying to accomplish. I know what I offer and what value I bring to the table. I know what I'm looking for. I know how I can serve people. I know how those certain people can serve me. And then I make those decisions to go to conferences or send a text or follow that person on Facebook or subscribe to their newsletter or ask them to come spend time with us on a hike that we're going to or whatever it may be. But the biggest thing that people get wrong about networking is they make it all about themselves. So if I'm trying to network with you, Kip, because I see that there's some synergy between what we potentially could do, I come into it very selfishly and I try to get mine as quickly as possible. That'd be like going out on a date with a woman and then saying, oh, I really like this woman. Will you marry me? It's like, whoa. Like, hold up a sec. First, you don't even know if you like or love me. Second, I don't know if I like or love you. Third, we don't know if we work well together and if we're aligned in our goals. That's what the courting process is, to try to figure that out. And if it works, then you keep courting. If it doesn't, then you go your separate ways and you find somebody else. And it's the same thing with networking. We come in and we're like, hey, Kip, I'm glad we met. Can you help me with this thing? It's like,
yeah,
whoa, you haven't earned the right to ask me to introduce you to somebody or to invest in your business or whatever. Instead, and here's what everybody ought to do, but most people don't, and it will set you apart, is always lead with value. Always. When in doubt, always lead with value. So if I know there's some synergistic opportunities, Kip, between you and me knowing each other, whether it's in our personal lives or professional lives, I'm really going to spend a lot of time thinking about what you as an individual need and what I might be able to offer, whether it's my own services or insight or even an outside introduction. So if I don't know you, Kip, but I want to get to know you, one really, really powerful tactic is this. I'm going to send you an email. Hey, Kip, I've been following you on social media for some time now, and I really like what you have to say about leadership. And I know you've got this project coming up. I'm making something up here. I know you've got this project coming up, and I have a great introduction to somebody who has done that exact same thing, and I think it'd be a really good connection for you. Would you mind if I made that introduction? Of course. I had a phone call with a friend of mine, and we were talking about some of his own personal and professional struggles, and mine too. We share these things with each other, and he's coming out with a new book. And I want to continue to build a relationship with this person. And so I said to him, hey, man, would it help if you came on my podcast? He's like, dude, I would love that. I'm like, good, come on the podcast. Does that guy think more highly of me now because I was willing to open up my platform to him to sell his book, or less? Of course, more. And when there comes a point in time where I have a new book or a program or something, and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I come on your podcast? I've got this thing come. Of course he's going to say yes to that. Of course he is. I don't keep score, so I want to be clear on that. But I'm always leading with value, finding ways to be the most valuable person in that individual's life. And if I can do that, then I'll never have a need for networking or connections. Never.
Love it. Drew Sands for Reels on Insta. How do you think about your earning potential? Has it evolved over time?
I don't really how do I think of my earning potential? I don't really think about it too much. Maybe I should. I don't know. What do you have some thoughts on this?
It should always be increasing, right? Your earning potential. Otherwise, I'm not growing. That's how I see it. When I think of earning potential, it should always be higher than it was a year ago. And if it's not, that means I'm not providing more value than who I was a year ago. So I always think it's this thing that should always be increasing. Otherwise, I use it as a measuring stick of what my impact is or the value I bring to the table.
I think you're right. I must do it maybe subconsciously. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about what my earning potential is, but if I'm going to do a speaking, I remember the first professional speaking gig I did. And I say professional because I got paid for doing it. I got $500. Yeah. Unless it's a friend, I'm never going to go speak in public for $500. Yeah. I would speak for friends for free in a lot of cases, or if there's some other benefit to it for me. But I would never do it. If an organization called and said, hey, can you come speak? I would never do it for $500. $5,000, maybe. Yeah. But then there's other people who are literally making $50,000 for a speaking engagement. So what's the difference? Well, it's that person's ability, it's their reach, it's their audience, it's their likability, it's the authority and influence and trust that they've already built up and established. So I think I do it subconsciously. I don't think about it in terms of how can I make more money. Well, I guess that's not true. I guess I do think about that. But I think this goes back to the OODA loop. Observing where you are currently, what kind of income you want to make, orienting yourself towards a direction, deciding which choice to make, and then acting on it. But I don't really think about earning potential too often.
I mean,
maybe I should.
I don't either. But I think, but we're both focused on improving constantly, which I think is a byproduct of increased learning potential. But yeah, interesting.
I don't think it's a byproduct. I think it's a prerequisite.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. All right, Snowden Rob.
Cool. What's next?
After 2 years of hardships, what have you learned about yourself, and where do you still feel needs improvement? Oh, this is you.
So he's specifically talking about battling, me, right? Yeah. Battling with alcoholism, battling with the divorce. I need to find, I've had to find ways to vent. And I don't mean vent like complain and whine and cry about my problems. I mean, let those problems, like actually address those problems and deal with them and confront them. And those problems are mentally, the stress that I sometimes have and the overwhelm that I sometimes feel, emotional, with the insecurities that I have. And I do have insecurities, fear and doubt and abandonment issues. And sometimes I feel like I have to prove myself in order to be loved. I think a lot of men probably feel that to some degree. So I've had to work through a lot of these through very clear and deliberate things. Physical exercise is a big thing for me. I've started to work more closely. I've had a therapist for a long time, but I was just going through the motions. And I had an experience, and Kip, you and I talked a little bit about this offline about 3 weeks ago, where I was confronted with a situation that made me realize, oh no, I actually need to take this seriously. Yeah. And I started working with a therapist, but before I started working with him, I made the commitment that I'm going to be honest with him. Because that isn't something I was really doing. Yeah, it was very subdued. It was tempered. I wasn't sharing all the bullshit and the baggage. I was just sharing like maybe what I thought he wanted to hear and what was like the culturally acceptable answer. Yeah. But when I started working with my new therapist, I made the decision that, no, I'm just going to share. And I might sound like an evil son of a bitch, but if I want to improve, then I have to be honest with somebody who can actually help me navigate my feelings. My girlfriend and I were laughing the other day about, I think we talked about this, if every single person had no brain to mouth filter, meaning we just regurgitated everything that goes through our mind, how disgusting and horrible we would all appear. Yeah. So that therapy has been really, really big for me, working through some of my emotional and mental baggage that I didn't realize I was carrying around.
Thanks for sharing that, man. I love this question. It's not often we get this kind of perspective on this question. So this is from Happy Tauntaun. How can I get my man to listen and understand and see me better? He preaches a lot. I would like for us to communicate in ways that build better connection and allow us to truly know each other.
I don't know. So this is coming from a woman, it sounds like. I don't know what you've already done. So whatever I share, you might have already tried it. But number one, I would say that you say exactly that to him. I think there's a big issue in communication between men and women. Women think they're saying things, but they're not. They're just flat out, they're not. And men interpret exactly what you say, which is why, for example, when a woman says, hey, will you go to the grocery store and pick up this butter? He says, what kind? And you're like, Blue Bunny. I don't even know the kinds of butter. Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes, that's one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you say this, okay, and he goes and he's like, shit, unsalted or salted? He doesn't know.
Margarine is what I would do.
I don't know.
I'd come home with margarine. Exactly. And she'd be pissed.
And she'd be pissed. And she's like, I told you to get butter. And you're like, well, yeah, but there's 17,000 things to choose from. So I just picked this one. It kind of looked like the one that was in the refrigerator last week. That's a silly example, but ladies, if you want to communicate more effectively with the men in your life, you have to be very clear and direct. If you say, for example, let's say you have a bad attitude and your guy comes home from work and he's like, what's up with you? And you're like, nothing, I'm fine. It's just a hard day. He's probably going to be like, okay. Like he knows something's wrong, but that's what you said. So like, okay, that's what I would do. I'd be like, okay.
Talk about it. Yeah.
And then you get pissed off that he's not caring about what you're going through. It's like, well, you told him not to. You said you're fine. If you actually want him to do something, say, you know what, hon, I really appreciate you asking. I had a really hard day. The kids were acting up. The guy at work was a dickhead. My customer fired me. And it was a really hard day. I appreciate you asking. And so what I need is a little space. Can you just take the kids on a ride or the park for an hour? Your husband would gladly do that. Hey, you know what? I'm going to go in the room and just like cry for a minute. Can you make dinner for us tonight? He would do that. But don't, and I'm not accusing you because I don't know, but women are guilty of this, where they'll be very cryptic in their stuff. Like, oh, I'm fine. It was just, that's fine. Nothing, no big deal. Okay, well then don't expect him to be able to read your mind on what it is you're going through. So you might be really upset that he's preaching to you. I'm guilty of this too, but he's preaching to you instead of listening to you. If you'd have never told him that, and I mean those exact words, hun, I get really frustrated. It sounds like you're preaching to me. I would just like to have a conversation without you lecturing me. And when you do X, Y, and Z, it sounds like you're lecturing. I still love you. I do want to hear your input, but I don't like this. That's how men communicate. And so if you want him to change his behavior, you need to be more clear than you currently are. I can almost with 100% certainty guarantee you're not communicating as effectively as you think you are based on the way he needs to hear it. I think that would solve a lot of your problems right there. What do you think though, Kip?
I think regardless of male or female, when I hear things like listen, understand, and see me better, when you hear see me, that means care. Understand my challenges. Understand my struggles, my desires. And often we have a tendency to expect the person to get there when in reality we need to bring them in and tell them. And so there's huge power in if I'm upset or I want my wife to understand me better, I can't be sitting back and going, well, I wish you would ask. No, man, that's called being a victim. Waiting and hoping is a victim mindset, right? Someone that's taking responsibility of their life, they make it happen. So what does that look like from a making it happen perspective? Hey, I'm really upset right now. I want to let you know when this occurred, I interpret this way. I know that's kind of weird, or maybe you don't agree with it or whatever, but so you can understand me and see me and understand how I operate, I want to let you know. So you know who you're dealing with, the little bit of crazy that's inside me. That's how we open up and make people or allow people to understand us better. We have to take the action and bring them in. So when you say, hey, I want my husband to have a better connection or see me better, then tell him. Tell him about you. Tell him what triggers you a little bit. But be careful. And this is where we go wrong with communication, I think a lot in relationships, is we'll communicate it and then we'll argue with people's perspective. There's no arguing. You can't argue with how someone feels. If Ryan calls me up and says, dude, I'm pissed off, I don't go, you shouldn't be. No, he is. So I'm not going to argue. Got it. Why? Help me understand that. We need to stop arguing with how people feel because they're sharing. And by the way, when I argue with how you feel, what are you going to do next time? Not share.
I'm not going to share it.
You're going to hold that stuff in. So celebrate the share. Never belittle the share. Otherwise, you're going to get people to stop sharing. And so those are two things that come to mind for me. Statement by Jordan Peterson the other day is just like icing on the top of this question. be careful what we ask for as well. Like, be careful what you get, right? Because it's really easy to see what we have and go, oh, it should be like better. He needs to be more empathetic. And be careful that you don't drive that so hard that you don't want a man that solves problems anymore. What happens now when you have a man that doesn't solve problems? All of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I want that back. And you can see this in other relationships where you want an ambitious husband, but yet you make it hard for him to be ambitious. What is it that you want? Be careful, right? Because otherwise we set the tone for what we get in our relationships. And often you don't get your cake and eat it too. So there's some power in just being grateful for who we are and who we're with, and realize that those things are difficult. It's hard to have a man that gives you tons of attention and time and is ambitious. It's hard to do both of those, and so be grateful for the things that we are getting, from our spouses at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I like it.
There you go.
All right. We got one more question, man. Ooh, good questions, man. Like there's three really good ones I want to cover. But I have a hard stop at 11. So let's go with this. Okay, 515 Sign Shop. How do I move on from what I thought was the love of my life? Been struggling for years.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say something that's going to hurt. You are wrong.
Yeah.
She is not the love of your life. That's it. She's not, clearly. Like you're saying she's the love of your life, and what you're actually saying is she's the only person for your entire life that you're supposed to love. And because you've adopted that mindset, you can't let her go. Yeah. I don't believe in the one. In fact, I don't think I ever have believed in the one. I believe in a one. I believe that there's a person there who you could have an incredible relationship with, and even a lifelong relationship. But I don't think it's the only person you can have that sort of relationship with. So from where I sit, and I'm hearing you right now, you got to get over that. She was the love of your life. She was the love of your past life. She was the love of that period. And be grateful and happy and remember the good times and let go, man. Like, let go. There are so many other incredible women out there, and I'm not saying you shouldn't mourn it. I'm not saying you shouldn't be upset. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn lessons. I'm not even saying you shouldn't strive to have a lifelong love with somebody. I think you should. That's what I want. But there's somebody else out there, and because you're holding on to all of this baggage and you're thinking about what could have been and what quote unquote should be, and she's the love of your life, and there isn't another soul that... None of that is true, brother. I'm telling you. When you open yourself up to loving somebody else and open yourself up to being loved by someone else, you're going to find out very, very quickly there are some incredible women in the world who would love to love you, who would love to be loved by you, and who you can create an incredible life with, but you can't do it if you're hanging on to what was. Be grateful for what was. Be sad about the loss of that, but know that was just a chapter of your life. It's time for her to move on. Maybe she already has. It's time for you to move on. Free yourself. Allow yourself to love. Allow yourself to be loved. Maybe do some of your own personal work. Maybe it's you don't love yourself. What can you do physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually to start to appreciate and love yourself and offer yourself some grace, knowing that, yeah, maybe that was you. Maybe you weren't showing up the way you could have shown up, and maybe if you did, it would be different. Okay, take those lessons into your next relationship and be better for that person and allow that next person to be good for you. Whether it's lifetime or the next year or the next 5 years, there's going to be another woman, but you got to be open and receptive to it.
One of the most powerful things that I think for you to consider when letting someone go is that you want what's best for them, even if it includes not you. Because a lot of our lack of letting someone go, it's very, in a lot of cases, I'm not sure if it's the case in this example, but it's often about me and what my needs and my wants and my desires are, and not what's really best for that person. So that's a powerful way to really let someone go. Be happy for them. Want the best for them. You want her to move on. You want her to find an amazing guy that she can have a relationship. If you really loved her, you want that for them. Be okay with that. And then in conjunction with what Ryan's saying, man, yeah, I totally agree. And by the way, Ryan, you said, I'm not sure if I've ever felt that way. I have. I used to think that. I used to think that there was the one. Absolutely. And it's not only is it not true, but it's also, that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. That's unfair, right? Yeah. Love yourself. Think you can be whole and complete on your own, and then choose to be with someone. That's the mindset you need to have in a relationship, in my opinion. If it's not like, oh, I'm not complete without her, whoa, that's way too much. No one wants that weight of managing my own happiness and managing theirs. And if I have a bad day, then I'm ruining his life. Like, that's too much weight to put on anybody. Be whole and complete on your own, man. Be happy with who you are. Feel great about it, and then choose to be with a great woman.
And they're, contrary to what all the guys on the internet will say, there are incredible, incredible women out there. They're there. They're ready for you. Not to say they don't have their own learning and growth. They do, but they are willing. There's a woman out there who is right for you. Not the only one, but a woman out there who is definitely right for you. And you're right for her. So you got to free yourself to be able to make a decision. That's what it is. You got to decide. Like, today.
Let go and move
you have to
on.
make that decision today. Like, I'm going to let go. I'm going to be grateful for what we had, and I'm going to let her go. Mentally, emotionally, physically, we're done here. Put a stick of fork in it. It's done. Now move on.
Good advice. I have a hard stop. So connect with Mr. Mickler on the socials at Ryan Mickler. Iron Council's opening up next month. orderofman.com/Iron Council to learn more. And as always, follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See Ryan's pretty face in that good lighting. YouTube.com/orderofman.
It's not a pretty face. It's good lighting. It makes
I don't know.
Pretty.
Someone made a post. Someone made a comment on social media. They're like, "Oh, you and Ryan look similar." And I made a comment. I'm like, "That's the best compliment you could ever give Ryan." Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw it. I was like, "That's funny."
That's true. I didn't think you were going to say that, but I was like, "Wait." I was like, really liked where that was going, and then he said, "Compliment to me." I'm like, "Oh, that isn't where I thought you were going to take that."
Awesome.
All right, guys. Appreciate you. Great questions today. As always, hopefully we gave you something to consider. Go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.